dudes, I'm Hilah, and today on Hilah Cooking we're making baklava or baklava. It's a crispy pastry that's filled with nuts and sugar and cinnamon, and it's often served in Greece at Easter time. So I thought it would be a perfect thing to make since Easter's coming up, guys. Hope you got your bunny outfits ready. First, let's talk about these nuts. These ovaries. These nuts right here. Gross, guys. Stop thinking about that stuff. Okay, I've got some walnuts and some pistachios. Walnuts are more typically used in Greece, I think, and pistachios are more typically used in Turkey, where baklava probably originated. But it's been around for a long, long time, and now it's been spread all over the place in many, many countries, and every place has its own little version. I'm going to use a combination of walnuts and pistachios, even though that may not be traditional. But you just want to make sure that you're not using any nuts that have been roasted or salted. So you want raw nuts. You can use almonds. Pecans are really good for a Texas twist. And I'm gonna wrap a little dishcloth around the bag. And then we're gonna pound these nuts. So you could use a food processor or a knife to chop them up, but I kind of like the texture better if you pound them. When your nuts, the biggest piece is no larger than a pea and the rest of it is kind of pulverized, you're good to go. So I'm gonna put them back into the bowl. Hey look, it's a hat! Just kidding. I think I got nut crumbs everywhere. Okay, then to this I'm gonna add some cinnamon, some lemon zest. You could use orange zest, a little sugar, or kind of a lot, and just a couple pinches of salt. Get that mixed up. So we can set this aside. That's gonna be our filling. Don't set it too far away because you're gonna need it. And then I've got a pan here. This is just an 8x8 square pan. I've lined it with a little bit of parchment just to make it easier to get the baklava out later. If you don't have parchment, it's not really a big deal. You'll be fine. And then I'm just gonna use some store-bought phyllo dough, which looks like that. This is like the only company I've ever seen that makes it. Athens, so you know it's authentic. Anyway, it's a super, super thin pastry. So it comes in a 1 pound box, and then each box has 2 tubes like this. So I'm just gonna use 1 tube. I've thawed it out overnight. You can find it in the frozen section, but it's a wheat-based pastry that's just like, literally like leaves of paper. It's so, 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 so thin. All right, so I'm gonna work quickly so I don't need to cover this. If this is the first time you're making baklava or something like that, you might wanna cover it with a damp towel just to keep it from drying out. And then this is melted butter. I'm just gonna brush a little bit on the bottom of my parchment. And then we start layering. So I'm gonna put down 2 sheets of phyllo dough, and then brush that with some butter. And I'm using unsalted butter. I would recommend that. Some recipes will also call for olive oil or a mixture of both. So whatever's your preference, but this makes it a little more sweeter, I think. A little more sweeter. And then I'm gonna fold these little overlapping edges down. You could double this recipe and make it in a 11 by 17 pan or a 13 by 9 inch pan, and then you wouldn't have to do any folding. The sheets just kind of slip right in. Just slip right in between the sheets. Get these edges covered. 2 more, and I'm gonna go the other direction this time since I'm folding them. Jesus, that took forever. Okay, and I'm gonna put down about 1/3 of my sugary sweet nuts. And just try to get it as even as you can. Then I'm gonna do 2 more phyllo layers with butter. And then for the top layer, you just wanna do exactly what you did on the bottom. 2 layers of dough, butter, until you run out of dough sheets. And then once you start getting towards the top here too, you wanna sort of push the edges down and make sure you're getting plenty of butter all around there to help those edges seal up. Last one, and I'm just gonna, before I butter it, just press it down around the edges again, just to get this tight seal around the edges. And then glue it all shut with the last of your butter. Muy importante, before you bake it, you've got to cut it into triangles or squares or rectangles or whatever the hell you want. If you wait till after you cook it, if you don't score it first, you're just gonna crush all the layers when you go to cut it. So I like to do diamonds, it's pretty traditional. So I'm using a serrated steak knife here. It's a little delicate, you kind of have to hold the layers down. You don't need to worry about getting all the way through. You just wanna at least get through like half of it. Okay, so we end up with 6 triangular or diagonal lines, and then I'm gonna go this direction, probably make like 5 or 6. All right, now I'm gonna put this in the oven at 325 Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Then I'm gonna reduce the heat to 300 and let it go for another 45 minutes to 60 minutes until it's kind of puffed up, golden brown. If you'd rather not mess with like remembering to change the temperature later, you can just cook it at 300 for 2 hours. It's not gonna get quite as puffed up, but it'll still be crispy and delicious, I promise. Okay, so when your timer says 30 minutes left, that's when it's time to make the honey syrup. So we're gonna go to the stove and do that. Put 1 cup of water in a pot. I'm gonna add 6 tablespoons of sugar, 1 little shred of lemon rind, and some lemon juice. Get the sugar dissolved and then bring the liquid up to a boil. Once it boils, reduce the heat and let it simmer for 15 minutes uncovered. Stir it occasionally. After 15 minutes, I'm gonna add our honey. Simmer it for another 5 minutes and then remove from the heat. Okay, so baklava is beautiful, it's brown, it's crispy, and I've seen several different recipes, and some of them will say to pour cold syrup over hot baklava, and some of them will say hot syrup over hot baklava. I don't really know if it matters. So I just do what's most convenient, which is usually hot syrup, hot baklava. So just pour it evenly. This is another reason we cut it first, so that it has lots of little nooks and crannies for that syrup to go into. And if you wanted to flavor the syrup with some orange flower water or some rose water, you could add that in at the end too, after you take it off the heat. Yeah, okay. So now you just want to let this cool. If you can refrigerate it overnight, that's ideal, but you definitely need to let it cool for a few hours so that it's not molten sugar water. All right, cooled off. You can lift it out with your parchment paper wings. So then just get like a big chef knife and cut through the rest of the way. Oh my gosh, so awesome and flaky and delicious. Okay, I'm gonna take this funky little triangle shaped piece. Oh my gosh, look at that. Look at those beautiful layers in there. If you like this recipe, also check out my fruit tart recipe. That would be another really, really good Easter kind of dessert. And also check out spanakopita for another recipe to use phyllo dough with. Meanwhile, I'm gonna have a taste of this. And none for the dogs. Yeah, butt brains. Good Lord. I hope you like this recipe. Please leave a comment. Printable recipes are always available at hilahlcooking.com, and that is the most reliable way to reach me if you have an important recipe question or comment. So go check that out. Visit me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. And I hope you try this recipe. It's super yummy and really not too difficult.